You know, because I have videos on YouTube of me playing guitar. About this January of this year, and a friend of mine that I actually used to be in a band with, somebody had asked me, you know, on Facebook if I, you know, had any videos of myself playing guitar, because, you know, telling somebody, you know, when and I've seen it before, you know, I'm standing in front of somebody looking like this, and I'm like, yeah, I play guitar, and they're like, yeah, I'm sure you do, you know, and so it's like, you know, nobody believes you. So I made a video, posted it on Facebook. A friend of mine saw it that I was in a band with. He said, man, you ought to start, you know, making videos and show people what you can do. And, you know, so I kind of did, and it kind of took on a life of its own. Since January, I have probably done about 130 videos. Just what I do is I just basically, what I'll be doing for you later is I just put on a song, because I can sing, but I don't like singing in front of people, and I'm kind of shy about that, you know. So I just play along to songs that I like, and that's basically how I taught myself how to play guitar. I would come home from work every day, and I would put songs on the computer that I like, and I would play along to them, and that's how I taught myself how to play guitar, which was 3 months prior to losing both of my hands. I was 23. I was working in a steel mill factory because that's the only job I could get. Didn't know anything about it, and was put to work on what is called a metal shear. If you would like to Google do an image search, okay, for a Cincinnati hydraulic metal shear. The machine was made, and now any pictures that he's going to pull up, they're not going to be anywhere near the type of machine that I was working on. The machine that I was working on was made in 1936. These machines are made with 2 buttons on the face of them so that your hands are out of the way of a blade. You have to press both of these buttons at the same time. They're spread out far enough that you have to use both hands to do it. And it's just safety precaution, you know, so that your hands are completely out of the way when the blade is activated. It is a just chopped sheet metal, you know. It's a big barbaric machine, and but this one didn't have a guard on it, and if the guard is in place, you can barely get your fingertips up under it. And it had also been rewired to run by a foot pedal instead of the buttons for quicker productivity and quicker production. So the day that I got hurt on this machine was the first day that I had ever stood in front of it. My foreman took me over to it, stuck a piece of metal in it, hit the foot pedal, looked at me and said, "That's how you do it." And so about 35 minutes later, I'm laying on the floor bleeding to death, fighting for my life. And what happened was the inside of this machine is open. So whatever you're cutting falls back behind the machine to the wayside. What I was cutting was flat bar. It was about that thick, about that wide, 1/4 inch thick, real flimsy. And I was having to cut it 32 inches, which was the full extent of the gauge. So it kept bowing up under the gauge, and I would have to keep resetting it. And I got one piece.
Which one of these is it?
The first one.
He's already sold it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that's, I mean, you know, you can kind of, that's pretty much what it looked like. It's very big.
Is that the same?
No, no, that's a lot smaller. It's just big, huge. I mean, this one's kind of similar, but not completely. The one that's up under it. But it's just, as you can tell, I mean, these are big barbaric machines. You know, I mean, it's basically like a hydraulic guillotine. You know, I mean, it's just, the blade came down, and I mean, these blades are made to chop sheet metal in half, you know, So what do you think it would do to flesh and bone? It's flesh and bone doesn't stand a chance. So I got my piece of metal up against the gauge, had it with my thumbs behind it, with pressure behind it to hold it in place. I had to take my attention off of it for just a second to find the foot pedal, and once I got my foot in the foot pedal, it bowed. And I went forward, foot went down, both hands, same time. This one was cut above the wrist, this one was cut through the hand. So, and, you know, as you know, you severed two main arteries. You know, it was, both of my arms were spewing blood like a faucet spews water. And I lost over half the blood in my body. I died at one point. My eyes, I felt my eyes rolling to the back of my head, and I knew I was dying. I knew that there was, you know, that was it. And started going toward that bright light like everybody says, you know. And the thing that scared me the most about it, I think, was that was the most peaceful thing I have ever experienced in my life. And you're, you know, and I knew I was dying. I knew I was dead. And, but all of a sudden, my eyes popped open. I looked at the guys that were sitting there trying to cut the bleeding off, and I just looked at them and I said, if we're gonna do this, we've got to do this now. There is no time to waste, you know. And it was probably, I got picked up by EMTs, took to local hospital. Local hospital was not a trauma center. They could not do anything for me but basically get me ready for helicopter pickup. And so, which meant that all they could do was cut my clothes off, insert IVs, and that was it. So it was probably about an hour and a half from the time of the accident till the helicopter got there. So I was experiencing every bit of this pain and every bit of this excruciating feeling, which it burned. It burned. I imagine, I've never been shot before, but I you know, I hear people say that, you know, when they're shot, it burns. That's what I kind of figure it's like, you know, because it burned. And I knew my hands were cut off. And here I am, just learned how to play guitar, and this was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. This was something that I had known that I wanted to do with my life since I was 12 years old. But I had a mother and a sister that just was not going to allow to have a rock guy in the family. So I had to, you know, by the time I was 23 years old, I was like, you know, I can do this. You know, and I knew I could do it if I could just get get the chance, get somebody to show me what to do. I knew I could do it. And so I moved from where I was living in Huntsville, Alabama, that's where I'm originally from, is Alabama. I moved from Huntsville, Alabama to Birmingham, Alabama, which Birmingham is very similar to Richmond. It's very, very similar to Richmond. But they had better music scene, and I had friends in that area that I knew if I was going to learn what I needed to learn, that was where I was going to learn. And, you know, in the three-month period, I learned how to taught myself how to play on a 12-string acoustic. Then I learned how to play bass. Landed a bass playing gig in a band the first night. I mean, I was there to watch them. Bass player didn't show up. I said, show me how. And before the night was over, I had the gig. And that was about a month in of learning how to play. And then that taught me how to play electric. And so in 3 months' time, I'd learned how to play on a 12-string acoustic, a bass, and electric. And then I lose my hands. And so I'm like, you know, sitting in my hospital room going, you know, what am I going to do now? You know, I've just lost my hands and I'm a guitar player. You know, so, and the first question I asked my surgeon was, will I play guitar again? He said no. And I didn't like that. Now, when I first got to the hospital, I was in a 12-hour surgery where they reattached both of my hands. And The accident happened on Wednesday. By Friday, well, actually by Thursday evening, I had gotten I could wiggle fingers on my left hand, which to me was like, encouragement, But when my surgeon came in and I showed him, and he just kind of like, and I was like, oh, that's not good. He doesn't seem very excited about this. And he basically came in the next day and told me that they were going to have to take my hands off. So I actually lost my hands twice. First time to an accident, the second time it had to be my decision to take them off. I had to be the one to tell the doctor, yes, it's okay for you to cut my hands off. And which was, at the time, you would think that it would have been a hard thing decision to make. But the amount of pain that I was in, and the fact that I knew that it was because of these hands, they had to go. I accepted the fact right then and there that my life was not going to go on as the way it had been for 23 years. Life was going to be different, and that was just how it was. I've never, and this is something that I've just recently, realized. I'd never realized this about myself, but never once in the almost 15 years that I've been an amputee have I ever looked at somebody and said, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why me? Because no matter all the griping, complaining, whining, wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to make my hands magically appear. They were gone. For the first 5 years, I didn't never complain, I never whine, but I did put on a mask that made everybody think that I was better than I really was. And because inside of me, I wanted that person that I was. I wanted them back. It was almost like I was holding on to them for dear life. Did not want to let them go. But I had to just come to the conclusion one day that, look, they're not coming back. That guy's gone. He's never coming back. And what part of him that is still here is inside you. You're still that guy, but you're not him. You're somebody else. And so, I had to basically say, okay, I will let you go. And, so that's what I did. I let that guy go and made life a lot easier. Now, prosthetic-wise, I was fitted with a pair of what they, basic starter prosthetics, and was the full harness. And but like I said, this arm wasn't healing as fast as this arm was, and so my OT had my prosthetists cut them in half and make it two separate pieces, and which made me able to function, to learn to eat, to learn to do whatever I needed to do. By the time I got to my first rehabilitation, basically, I had, it was about a month and a half into this process. I was still angry. I didn't want to have anything to do with a rehabilitation center. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. Didn't want to have anything to do with anybody there because I was still angry. But after I started figuring out how to do some things, like I had to be put on a medication called Uriah for phantom pains. And because this is a neurological drug, I had to go and stay in the psych ward of UAB Hospital, which that really ticked me off too, because I'm like, look, I'm not psycho, they're like, no, you're not going to be in there with people that think they're Jesus and stuff like that. You're going to be in there with people that are, have just little problems. I'm like, well,